My life with Ralph always seemed perfect. At first glance, no one could find the slightest issue in our relationship. We had a house in a peaceful and beautiful neighborhood. The tall trees around the house, the garden filled with colorful flowers, and the windows always bathed in sunlight were places for rest and peace. Even on busy work days, when I returned home, nothing could disturb this feeling of calm. Ralph and I always got along well. He was the manager of a successful tech company, and I worked for a large consulting firm. Our schedules were always arranged in such a way that we could build a good life together. We spent our holidays together, went to new restaurants at night, and on weekends we sat side by side at home and enjoyed the tranquility of our life. But these days, something had changed. I felt that Ralph was slowly distancing himself from me. At first, I didn't pay much attention to it. I thought maybe he was more involved in his work than usual and needed rest. But as the days passed, this feeling grew stronger. His gaze was no longer warm and filled with love like before. His distance from me increased. His calls were always short and impersonal. When he came home, it seemed as though his mind was somewhere far away. Sometimes, at night when Ralph slept beside me, I would stare at the ceiling and wonder how everything had changed. How had the days we spent together slowly turned into endless silences and invisible distances? Why had neither of us ever talked about these changes openly? I felt like something was brewing between Ralph and me. This feeling gradually turned into a knot in my heart that I couldn't untangle. Everything seemed to be progressing naturally, but I couldn't shake these vague and endless feelings. One night, after a long day at work, when I came home, Ralph came home later than usual. Hours had passed, and I was sitting in the living room. The silence in the house felt even heavier than usual. I wanted to say something, but I couldn't. When Ralph entered, he gave me a brief greeting and quickly went to the bedroom. For a moment, I stared at the closed bedroom door. He had never been this distant from me. He had never gone to the room so quickly. I knew something more than just usual tiredness was going on. There was something in his heart that he was hiding from me. A week passed. Ralph's behavior continued to change. The once lively and energetic man who was always with me was no longer there. He spent most of his time on work calls, and when he was home, everything seemed like a responsibility for him. Silence prevailed more and more in the house. I felt that there was something in him that I didn't want to look at, but sometimes when I looked into his eyes, I saw one clear thing: distance. That night, after several more days of Ralph's behavior bothering me, I decided to pay more attention to him. While I was organizing the desk in the study, I glanced at Ralph's drawer. It seemed insignificant, but my heart told me that I had to do this. Maybe I was wrong, maybe I shouldn't be doing this, but something inside me said that this was the only way I could figure out what had happened to our relationship. When I opened the drawer, my eyes fell on a letter at the bottom of it. A letter from a woman named Sarah. My heart started racing. My hands began to tremble. A letter that Ralph had never shown me from a woman named Sarah. At first, I thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe Ralph was just involved in a work project. But when I started reading the letter, I realized that this connection was more than just a simple mistake. In the letter, Sarah referred to a future meeting with Ralph. Her words were full of emotions and shared plans. This was something I had never wanted to hear. In my heart, I thought, is this a mistake? Did Ralph really cheat on me? But the more I thought about it, the more I came to the conclusion that this might not just be a mistake, but a harsh reality that I had been unaware of. That night I couldn't sleep. I was drowning in my thoughts. I told myself, how could I have been in this relationship for all these years and never suspected this? How can I trust someone who has hidden this from me? My life completely changed in a single moment. When I found Sarah's letter, I thought maybe it was just a mistake, maybe nothing serious was happening. Maybe Ralph was just busy with work, and these connections weren't emotional at all. But the more I thought about it, the more naturally I knew that this wasn't just a simple accident. The truth was hidden behind that letter, and now I had to face reality. For several nights, I couldn't sleep properly. Every night, I was absorbed in thoughts about how I should talk to Ralph. He was someone I had lived with for years, someone I thought would always be by my side. How could I tell him that I had found the letter? How could I tell someone who had hidden everything from me that now I had discovered the truth? I knew that if I asked him for the truth, our relationship might come to an end, but I had to do it. I couldn't live any longer in this doubt and confusion. That night, when Ralph returned home later than ever, despite all the anxiety inside me, I decided to speak with him. A heavy silence filled the house. Everything felt lifeless and empty. Nothing was as heavy as the sound of Ralph's footsteps in the hallway. As soon as he entered, he went straight to the bedroom without saying anything. But I had to break this silence. I had to confront him with the truth. When I entered the bedroom, I quietly said to Ralph, "Ralph, do you want to talk about something?" He paused for a moment, and then, in a low voice, he said, "Are you sure you want to talk about this?" His question only made me doubt even more. It seemed like he wanted to hide something I shouldn't know. My heart was beating faster than ever. I told myself that it was time to learn the truth. I was afraid to speak, but I was more afraid of staying silent and continuing to live in this situation. "Ralph, I found this letter," I said, my voice trembling. "Why does it have to be like this? Why do you have to hide something from me?" Ralph's face changed. For a moment, it seemed as if he realized he was trapped. He spoke softly. "Alyssa, it was just a mistake. There's nothing more to it. Sarah is just a colleague. It's nothing serious." But deep inside, I felt that he was lying. He was clearly hiding something from me. I didn't want to believe it, but the truth was harsher than anything I wanted to hear. "I can't believe that this is just a mistake," I said, my voice louder than ever. "Why didn't I know about this? Why have you kept this from me? Why have we become like this?" Ralph, visibly disturbed by the conversation, took a few steps back and said, "Alyssa, it's not what you think. I never wanted to push you away. It's nothing more than this." But I couldn't believe his words anymore. Those were just lies he was telling to cover up the truth. My heart was breaking. I couldn't continue living in this life built on lies. This life no longer meant anything to me. Everything changed the moment I found that letter. I still remember clearly the moment I pulled it from the drawer. When my hand touched it, it felt as if everything stopped suddenly. I had felt for a long time that something was wrong in my relationship with Ralph, but that moment, the letter from Sarah, was like a slap in my face. This letter was no longer just a warning sign. It was a painful truth that shook the foundation of my life. I remember how my hands trembled when I started reading it. Sarah, a name I had never heard before in my life. In her letter, she spoke about a meeting she had arranged with Ralph. None of this seemed to fit in with the routine of our life together. I had never suspected Ralph, but that letter truly made everything turn upside down. At that moment, I felt like everything was lost. This letter was like a mirror, showing me what had been hidden behind the scenes of our relationship. Nothing was the same anymore. That letter revealed a painful truth I had been unaware of. Deep inside, I felt that I could no longer continue my life as it was. A few nights after finding the letter, I said nothing. I just kept looking at Ralph. He had returned home, and just as I had seen recently, he was indifferent and drained. When he entered the house, he barely greeted me and immediately went to the bedroom. Nothing felt like it had before. His look, his behavior, everything had changed. I couldn't accept that there was something hidden from me, but now the truth was clear, and I could no longer escape it. I didn't want to face him the way I did now, but how could I continue living with his lies? This life was impossible for me. When I looked at him at night, his face seemed like that of a stranger. It was true that we had been together for years, but now it seemed that nothing from our previous life remained. Days passed as usual, but the nights were filled with confusion and worry. Endless questions swirled in my mind. Had all those years I spent with Ralph been a lie? Was this relationship I had trusted now headed in the wrong direction? And most importantly, should I ask him for the truth? Or should I stay silent, as I always had, and let this relationship continue on its course? One night I decided that I had to ask Ralph for the truth. I couldn't live in this lie any longer. Although I knew that these words might end our relationship, I couldn't bear to stay silent. When Ralph entered the house, the silence that had settled between us was unbearably heavy. I walked up to him and said in a trembling voice, "Ralph, we need to talk. I found a letter. Why didn't you tell me anything? Why did you have to hide this from me?" Ralph's eyes clearly turned away from me. He wasn't the man I had once known. This person now seemed disturbingly indifferent. He paused for a moment and then said, "Alyssa, I never wanted to push you away. This was just a mistake. Nothing more." But I couldn't listen to those words anymore. They were just lies being told to cover up the truth. Everything had become clear. This wasn't just a mistake, it was betrayal. This was a big lie that had ruined everything in my life. A heavy silence settled in the house when Ralph returned. His face had changed completely. His gaze was cold and lifeless, as if he had set aside all his emotions, and now a stranger was standing in front of me. There was something in his look that no longer made sense to me. Nothing was like it used to be. I remember sitting there, trying to organize my thoughts. I had to say something that would show I could no longer continue living like this. I couldn't allow him to get away with these lies. I couldn't live a life built on lies anymore. He had betrayed me, and I couldn't keep living with someone who had lied to me. When he entered the living room, he gave me a short greeting, but his voice was no longer calm and affectionate like before. The silence, the lack of emotion, it made everything feel even heavier. I felt deep inside that Ralph was running away from a truth he couldn't face. He was hiding something, and what he was hiding cast a shadow over my life. Nothing felt like it used to. I remember how I sat there, trying to gather my thoughts. I had to say something that would make him realize that I could not continue like this. I couldn't let him get away with it. He had to know that I was done living in lies. When he finally got up and came toward me, his eyes still avoided mine. When he looked at me, it was as if he was hiding something. I raised my voice and said, "Ralph, I need to ask you something." He sighed and quietly said, "Ask, Alyssa. But be sure that nothing will make this relationship better." He paused. There was something in the silence that pushed me further away from him. It seemed as if, from the inside, he was distancing himself from me. My hands began to tremble. This was no longer a joke. This was the truth, and I could no longer escape it. "Ralph, I found this letter," I said, my voice filled with anxiety and pain. "Why have you hidden this from me? Why does it have to be this way?" Ralph hesitated for a moment. His face changed, but not entirely. It seemed like he was retreating into himself. Slowly he said, "Alyssa, Sarah was just a colleague. There was nothing between us. It was just a mistake." But I could no longer believe those words. These were just lies that he was using to hide the truth. Everything was clear now. This wasn't just a mistake. It was betrayal. This was a big lie that had destroyed everything in my life. My heart ached as I realized that what he was saying wasn't the truth. My voice grew louder as I said, "No, Ralph, this isn't just a mistake. It's a betrayal. I can't continue in this relationship." Ralph's face changed completely. He stepped forward as if he wanted to explain, but I had no desire to hear anything from him. I felt like nothing mattered to me anymore. I couldn't live in a lie any longer. "I never meant for it to turn out this way," Ralph said, his voice broken and weak. "Alyssa, please give me a chance to make things right." But I could no longer give him another chance. All those years with Ralph as my life partner had now been destroyed by the truth he had hidden from me. I felt in my heart that he was no longer the man I had known. "Ralph, I can't live with someone who has betrayed me," I said, my voice shaking. "I can't continue." Ralph's face changed completely. He couldn't believe that I was leaving him. I felt like he still needed me, but I had completely detached from him. This moment was a step toward my freedom. I could no longer live in this lie. I didn't sleep that night. From that night, nothing was the same. When Ralph left the house, a heavy silence filled the space, a silence that seemed like nothing would ever change. But I couldn't continue living like this. He had betrayed me, and I had promised myself that this time I would protect myself. He never asked me to forgive his lies, but I decided to build a new life for myself, a life that would be free of lies and betrayal. The morning after the separation, my house fell into complete silence for the first time, a silence that had never existed in our shared life. Now, I was alone in the house, and nothing remained from the past but painful memories. At that moment, I felt that nothing could take away this heavy feeling inside me. But at the same time, this feeling represented a kind of freedom. I had been freed from what had hurt me. I didn't know how I would get through this time, but I knew that I couldn't live in lies any longer. A few days passed, and I still had conflicting feelings. While I was suffering from the pain of Ralph's betrayal, I also felt that I had to accept this pain. This was the only way I could move beyond my past. I promised myself that I would live independently and strongly. Maybe it was difficult at first, but deep inside, I had found the belief that I had to rebuild myself. During this time, I spent a lot of time thinking about myself. I didn't want to think about Ralph. I didn't want to think about what had happened between us. But sometimes, in the lonely nights, I remembered the days when Ralph and I were together. I remembered the moments when he looked at me, and it seemed that everything in the world was made for the two of us. I remembered how safe I felt with him, but now everything had faded. I decided to do something that would change my life. The first step was to change my home. I had lived in that house for a long time, and every corner of it reminded me of Ralph. I told myself that to start over, I needed to find a new place. In this way, maybe I could distance myself from the past and begin a new life. After searching around the city, I found a small, cozy house. Nothing in it reminded me of what I had before. In fact, this house became a sanctuary for me, a place where I could find myself. Moving to a new house wasn't easy. The boxes and belongings were scattered around the house quickly, but in my heart, nothing else mattered. I felt that I had to leave everything behind. This new home was, in a way, a new beginning for me. Months passed. My life began to take the shape I had always dreamed of. I had found myself. My work had progressed. My home had become a place of peace and safety for me, and I felt more tranquility than ever before. But there was still something that remained in my heart. Even though I had decided to distance myself from Ralph, those painful moments and memories wouldn't leave my mind. Ralph never reached out to me. During the time I had been away from him, it seemed like he was immersed in his own world and that I no longer mattered to him. But sometimes, in the moments when I was alone, in the darkness of the night, or when I was thinking about the future, his memories would come back to me. I remembered the days when everything seemed perfect. We had so many dreams, but now none of them had come true. The harsh truth that had settled in my heart would never go away. One day when I was out shopping, I suddenly heard a familiar voice. I saw his face from a distance. In that moment, my heart stopped for a few seconds. Ralph. He was standing unusually close to me. I couldn't believe it. This encounter was completely accidental. I hadn't expected to see him after all this time. He came toward me, looking somewhat pale. His face was distant from the carefree expression I used to know. Maybe time had passed for him the same way it had for me. My heart raced faster than ever. I knew I had to face him, but deep inside, I felt confusion and fear. Alyssa. His voice was broken. Hello, I wanted to talk to you. Before I could say anything, he continued, I know nothing can fix what I've done, but I truly didn't want to hurt you. I ruined everything. Please let me see you again. I want to explain. Ralph's voice, shaking with emotion, was unfamiliar to me. The calm and affectionate voice I had always known now seemed full of doubt and regret. He was just as hurt as I had been. But how could I trust him again? How could I accept someone who had betrayed me? I looked at him. I wanted to say something that would make everything clear in an instant, but it felt like the words were stuck in my throat. I knew I couldn't escape the past. I couldn't ignore all the pain that had come from Ralph's betrayal and lies, but I also couldn't be heartless and push him away. Maybe part of me still wanted to forgive him, but I couldn't deceive myself. Ralph, I said with a trembling voice, surprising myself. You betrayed me. I can't get past these lies. I can never live this way. Ralph was silent for a moment, then said, Alyssa, I regret everything. I hate myself. I never wanted to push you away, but now all I feel is regret. I looked into his face. There was nothing in his gaze but pain and regret. But I still couldn't forgive him. Deep down, I felt this relationship had to end. Although a part of me was still connected to him, I couldn't live with someone who had lied to me and broken my heart. Ralph, we can't go back. I can't continue this life, I said, my words coming from the depth of my heart. For me, this decision was the hardest thing I could do, but at the same time, I felt it was the only way forward. Ralph's face completely changed. He tried to say something, but I didn't hear a single word from him. He just stared at me, then quietly said, I've always loved you, Alyssa. I never wanted it to be like this. But those words no longer mattered to me. Nothing could bring back what had been lost. Ralph and I had separated, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. This relationship was over.